So the plan today is I'm going to try to fix the organization issue that I have in the garage right now, and that's that I have a giant workbench. When I built it, I thought a 16-foot workbench would be all I ever needed. But now that I've been using it more, I find that the workbench is usually full of tools and not full of projects. And I want the tools to be next to the workbench, easily accessible from the workbench, but not on the workbench. So I don't want to get a big toolbox for most of these. I like having a smaller toolbox I can carry around as I need it. So what I've decided to do is go with a pegboard wall behind the workbench that I can hang everything on. So the plan today is first I'm going to build some planter boxes for my wife's garden, and then after I've done that, I'm going to build some pegboard walls. And I mean, I bought the pegboard, but like I'm going to hang everything up, organize that area of the workbench, and then it should look a lot cooler. I'm hoping to take it from what you see here to, if everything works out, I'm gonna insert a shot of what it looks like when I'm done, which is this. Hopefully that looks really good. So that's the plan. Let's go build it. So I'm not a woodworker, as you'll see here, so I thought starting with these raised beds would knock some of the rust off and let me think through how I wanted to set up the pegboards. For the raised beds, I'm just building a roughly square box and adding some posts on each corner so that I can wrap wire around to keep critters out. This DSLR is a lot harder to hold all the way out here smoothly, so I hope this looks decent. But let me flip this around and show you what I did with the beds. They look decent. I don't have the wire on them yet, but I'll get that sorted out in a day or two. Gotta go get a staple gun. But I should have enough room to get the mower down around them. Just had the first cut of the year, so you can see I still need to go by and trim it. I'm not exactly sure everything that my wife planted here. I think there's squash, cucumbers, flowers, marigolds maybe, a few other things, but yeah, they turned out, you know, fine. It's a box with dirt in it. Wow, great narration, man. You're killing it. So next step was to clear off all of the not projects from the workbench. This is where having a 2-car garage is really handy because you can pile junk in one bay, work in the other, and still have some room to maybe set up a nice usable workbench. So next, I used 1x2 inch wood strips to form the bottom mounting platform for the pegboard. I've decided to make the pegboard section 2 feet tall by 16 feet wide, which I think will be enough room to hang up the most used tools with some sort of organization. Also, that's half the pegboard that I need if I was going full height, and getting the exact black pegboard that I wanted isn't that cheap. I think the black pegboard is a better aesthetic choice. I pulled these brackets off the wall when I first moved in. They're for mounting a custom shelving setup, which you may have seen on the wall opposite the workbench. I kept most of the setup, but removed enough of it that I have a few leftover brackets. Combined with the few that I bought just for this project, I should have enough. You'll see a recurring theme of me doing a fairly budget job for a lot of the things here because I have leftover plywood I want to use up and my needs aren't so incredible that I want a shelf that'll hold 2,000 pounds. That said, I do want the finished project to be functionally high quality even if it's not the best looking because I'm using scrap stuff, so I got some serious hardware to hold the brackets onto the wall. The larger bolts are leftovers from the brackets I just painted, and the smaller ones are sized to fit the additional brackets I bought. Combined with 3/4 inch plywood, this should be a fairly sturdy shelf for above the pegboard. Okay, so you can see that is what the pegboard looks like. And then I've got those strips 2 feet apart. And I've got the brackets. They're not spaced evenly. Well, they're not spaced evenly with the shelf that's going to go on them. They're spaced on the studs. So unfortunately, it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical, but it should look close enough. And the plan is I'm going to notch the pegboard so it cleanly fits around the brackets. I'm going to mount it, and then I'll have a nice 2x16 foot strip of pegboard that I can hang whatever I want from, and then I'll have a shelf on top of it, lights hanging from the shelf. Should be really awesome. The biggest issue with the shelf so far is the warping from it sitting in my garage for close to a year just leaned up against the HVAC ductwork. So a few extra bracing pieces are needed to support the weight of whatever's on the shelf without letting the plywood flex more. Scrap 2x4 chunks screwed to the wall is very ugly but very functional, so it's keeping in line with the rest of the shelf. Once the shelf was done, it was time to actually start mounting pegboard. After figuring out that my handsaw was no longer doing its job and probably needed to be replaced, I ended up just using the circular saw to cut notches for the shelf brackets and started mounting everything. This went very smoothly, all things considered. I used at least 4 3-inch screws for each piece, with 1 3/4-inch screws helping to hold the pegboard to the furring strips. So each pegboard has 4 points of contact with the stud, and at least 4 additional points of contact with the furring strips, which are in turn mounted to the studs. I don't know how much weight the pegboard itself can take, but the connection to the wall will not be the limiting factor for how much I can put on it. After finishing mounting the pegboard and cleaning it, the last step before starting to hang tools was to replace the fluorescent bulbs in my workbench lights with LED tubes. It doesn't cost much more to get LED bulbs that don't require you to remove the fluorescent fixture's ballast to prevent wiring problems, so the bulbs I got are 4000K for a warmer, friendlier feeling than the greenish-blue mixed color temperature of all the fluorescent tubes currently in the garage. I'll probably replace all the tubes in the garage if I like the temperature of these ones, and so far, I do. The light looks much nicer and more inviting both because of the temperature and because of it being an LED. I'm not following a plan for hanging tools. I'm usually of the opinion that the best way to organize something is to put things where you typically look for them first, so the next time you go to look for them, you'll find it right where you were expecting it. So, while one of the first tools I hung was my grandfather's framing hammer, which is that red one, and it does mean a lot to me to have it prominently hung in my garage, its location may change in the future if I instinctively look for it somewhere else on the pegboard when I need a hammer, so it could end up way over on the side if that's what makes the most sense. I'm starting with the layout that makes sense to me now, and I'll refine from there over the next few months. Overall, I'm very happy with how this turned out. Like I said earlier in the video, the goal was always budget-conscious functionality over the prettiest or cleanest style. I think the pegboard does look really good, but the mismatched light fixtures and scrapwood shelf are obviously less visually pleasing. I probably won't care much after the first few days because I'll just be too busy using it and enjoying all the extra space on my workbench. See you for the next project.